life is just happening. If you agree with me, the situation we find ourselves is strange, but not too strange, because every now and then we are faced with circumstances that may be negative in one sense, but within that negativity, we find some positivity as well. And that is basically life happening. There are always issues that we are going to be confronted with. That is why it's important to seize the moment. Now, one of my favorite quotes is by Sir Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister is the first person to run a mile under 4 minutes. Yes, the first person in the world to run 1 mile in less than 4 minutes. And he says that every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the fastest lion, or it will be killed. Every morning a lion wakes up. It knows it must outrun the slowest gazelle, or it will starve to death. Now, that is typical of life. Life is a race, as we often say. You are chasing one thing, and another is also chasing you at every point in life. And it's that kind of race that exists between a gazelle or an antelope and then a lion, as depicted on your screen. A typical example is when it comes to making money to meet our needs and our wants and our luxuries. When it comes to wealth, we are a lion, or you are a lion, because you are chasing after wealth, chasing after other things that supposedly will give you happiness. So in that sense, we are a lion chasing after those things. Now, when it comes to paying bills, then we become a gazelle, because the bills will be chasing us. There's no end to the bills that will be chasing us. And in all this, you must run fast enough to be able to accomplish the objective. If you don't run fast enough, you'll be overtaken by bills and so on. Okay. So he goes on to say that it doesn't matter if you're a lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better be running. Yes. And so we need to seize the moment. The number 7 is very significant in so many ways. And I know most of the time people refer to the number 7 as representing perfection. Yet, there are several significances, and I want to throw light on other significances of the number 7 in the context of our discussion tonight. First of all, what we are going to be sharing, or what we are going to be talking about, are things we should have been hearing from age 7. So as early as 7 years or about 7 years, we should have been hearing some of the things we are going to be hearing. Also, at least we should be hearing that 7 times over. In other words, whatever we are going to be hearing tonight, hearing it once, twice, even thrice is not enough. You should hear it at least 7 times. And here is the reason. The average person or the average mind, because of our socialization, we do not ordinarily we do not pay attention to what we hear, what we observe, and so on, until it is repeated to us about 7 times. So, for instance, when it comes to sales or marketing, sales executives are taught to appreciate that when they are having a sales conversation with a prospective buyer or a customer, they must invite the customer to buy at least 7 times within the session in order to be effective and things like that. So ordinarily, we don't pay attention to what we hear until we hear it repeated about 7 times. Then we begin to think about it more carefully. All right. So it's possible that some of the things you hear tonight, you might have heard it somewhere or from me or read from elsewhere. But until you hear it or see it or it's repeated to you or you repeat it to yourself 7 times, trust me, you haven't given it the needed consideration there is to it. Okay. And then most importantly, whatever you hear, you are encouraged to share it with at least 7 people or 7 groups and so on, or a combination of people or individuals and then groups. But at least you should have 7 people or more hearing it from you, either directly or sharing our page with the person or with the group or with the person and so on. So those are the significances of the number 7 I would want to bring our mind to. But there's a problem. And you probably might have heard me say this, and I can't repeat it enough. The fact that most people are not truly fulfilled in life. It's a big deal. The fact that most people are not truly fulfilled in life. Now, I want to emphasize on the word truly, because fulfillment can be relative. But when you talk of true fulfillment, that is not relative. And as part of this discussion, we may begin to examine what true fulfillment is. Now, when I say that most people are not truly fulfilled, it's important to give examples. And the first example I'd like to give is a very popular one. It's a very important one because it affects each and every one of us. It's about the occupations or jobs we find ourselves in. Now, one of the notable researchers in the area of human resource and related field is called H.M. Greenberg. In a landmark study, he identified that most of the people who go to work every day wish they didn't have to go to work. Indeed, only 18% of people feel good about their work. A whopping 82% of people do not feel good about their work and wish they didn't have to go to work. In other words, if tomorrow or Monday you see people rushing to work, for every 100 of them, only 18 are comfortable going. 82 out of every 100, no matter how busy or how jostling or how rushing you may find them, wish they didn't have to go to work because they detest or they resent the work in one way or the other. These are things we hardly talk about, but people are hurting in that light. And it's important that we highlight these things so that people can now begin to see that it's real, they are not alone, and most importantly, there are ways out of it. So in seizing the moment, we'll be talking about how to avoid such situations within ourselves and our people. So that's the first example I want to cite. Now, the second example has to do with very notable suicides that have happened in recent times. Now, notable suicide just because of the personalities involved. But the fact that people commit suicide is enough evidence to suggest that people are not truly fulfilled. And it's not a small number. The statistics when it comes to suicide, it's staggering. It's shocking. But let's take note of these ones to help us appreciate the extent to which these issues go. And the first one has to do with Matthew Warren, the son of this famous pastor, Rick Warren. And I know your mics are muted, so I wouldn't bother you for now. But subsequently, we'll make the presentation as interactive as possible. So let me just say that Rick Warren is the author of one of the world's best-selling books, The Purpose-Driven Life. The Purpose-Driven Life. Okay, it's a very popular book. It sold millions of copies worldwide. It's been translated into several languages. And it's an amazing book. No two ways about that. Now, Pastor Rick Warren's son, Matthew Warren, committed suicide in 2013. Can you believe that? The son of a reverend minister who has written such a powerful book, The Purpose-Driven Life, ended up committing suicide. And what is interesting is that this shook the father so much that he had to take time off his preaching engagement. I think he stayed up for almost 3 months. My memory serves me right. Now, what's notable is what Pastor Rick Warren said when he resumed the pulpit, when he got back into the pulpit. And let me try and paraphrase, or if I can quote. He says that in spite of America's best doctors, meds as medicines, and prayers for healing, the torture of mental illness never subsided. And on the day, and he said it on the day that the son committed suicide. Today, after a momentary period of get together with the family, he took his life. And he also said, and this one he said it when he resumed the pulpit, said that for 27 years, I prayed to God that he will more or less save the son from that condition. Okay, but the problem the son was facing never subsided, and eventually the son took away his own life. The next notable suicide I want to cite, just to bring home the point that
happiness, the small boy.
Even though people may seem happy, we may be going about, everybody is dilly-dally, or everybody is fine, or seemingly things are not that easy for a lot of people. And that is Robin Williams, one of the famous actors and comedians the world has ever seen. One of his movies that became so popular was Six Fire. Now in 2014, Robin Williams committed suicide in spite of all the wealth, in spite of all the fame and all the things there is. One of the most shocking ones is that of Gregory Iles. Now, Gregory Iles is the Executive Director of Counseling and Psychological Services and Head of Mental Health Services at University of Pennsylvania. I want to repeat that. Gregory Iles. Now listen carefully to the person's position, qualification, and responsibility. He was the Executive Director of Counseling and Psychological Services and Head of Mental Health Services at University of Pennsylvania. Now, if you and I are not feeling good and want to talk to somebody, Gregory Iles qualifies as one of the people we should be talking to because he's a psychologist. And not just that, he's Executive Director of Counseling and Psychological Services. And he's been Head of Mental Health Services. At no mean a place as a university, and no mean university than University of Pennsylvania. But he ended up committing suicide. Interestingly, on that same day that Gregory Iles committed suicide, another pastor, Jared Wilson, who is also author of an amazing book titled Love is Oxygen, How God Can Give You Life and Change Your World. He committed suicide. Now listen to his title again. He's a pastor and not just a pastor. He's written a book titled Love is Oxygen. And look at the subtitle. How God Can Give You Life and Change Your World. So the question is, what happens? Now, may their souls rest in peace. So these are just to highlight the point that it doesn't matter how we see people, all the excitement we find around us, and with that, people go through very difficult situations that they may not exhibit, they may not talk about, and so on. But these things are going on every day. People commit suicide. Every blessed day, people commit suicide. Now, it is known that some contemplate, but they don't get to even attempt it. Some also attempt it, but do not get to execute it successfully. Recently, one of the persons who has been crusading against suicide and calling for mental health attention is Dr. Charles Benham. Now, he attempted suicide, I think, about 4 times. I don't know if you've listened to his story, but he attempted suicide at about four times, and each of them was unsuccessful. And now he's doing a lot. He's gone on to do his PhD and is doing a lot for humanity. And the third one I like to cite is about the business world and what is happening. Of course, even today, some businesses started. Tomorrow, new businesses will spring up. Indeed, we are encouraged to venture into business. We'll talk more about that later. But there's a problem in the business world in that for every 100 businesses that start, within the first 5 years, 80 of them collapse. 80% of businesses that start fail within their first 5 years. For the next 4 years, after the 5 years, of the remaining 20%, 80% of that will still fail. So that means after 9 years, only 4 out of 100 businesses remain. Okay. So for every 100 businesses that start, after 9 years, only 4 of them remain. And of the 4 that remain, only 1 make a significant profit. So only 15% of startups make a significant profit after 9 years. The rest just hang in there. So the business world is tough. And that is a contributing factor to the lack of fulfillment that we are talking about, or potentially a contributor to the lack of fulfillment we are talking about. Now, let me just chip in here that even though these things are happening, it's still possible to live a truly fulfilling life amidst all this. And that's the target we are looking at as we go forward. Now, the fourth example has to do with the situation we find ourselves in as Africans, or as Africa, if we are not African. So it doesn't matter which part of the globe we find ourselves. What is happening in Africa is a cause for concern. And what is happening in Africa? Africa is blessed with all manner of natural resources, and to a very large extent, is deemed as the richest continent in the whole of the world. You can cite Congo, for instance. Congo has almost, well, let me say that even our mobile devices, many of our electronic devices wouldn't survive or wouldn't come to be without resources from Congo. Mineral resources like coltan and so on. But Africa is blessed with cocoa, bauxite, diamond, timber, and what have you. And indeed, some of the cities are well developed. At least good parts of some of the cities, like the one shown above. This is from a city from South Africa. In spite, or let me say, in addition to that, Africa is blessed with people who have had some good level of education from very reputable institutions, some even having schooled abroad and so on. And most Africans are highly religious, very prayerful, take worship very seriously and all that. Now, in spite of all this, Africa is largely groping in the dark, in that poverty abounds. There's low GDP and high infrastructure deficits. There's poor reading culture and poor application among even intellectuals. There's very low employment. There's high level of depreciation of local currencies. The environment is highly degraded. The transportation system is nothing to write home about. Healthcare is virtually non-existent. And life expectancy is so low. Individuals who profess to be religious and exhibit religious traits are highly self-centered even from within, and so on. You can name more. But that is the plight of Africa. And all this happen because majority of people have accepted to be less than they were born to be and accomplishing far less than their true capabilities. And that is the fifth factor that contributes to the lack of true fulfillment in life. Now, when we say majority of people have accepted to be less than they were born to be, we are talking 97% of people. That means for every 100 people that you put together at random, with the exception of 3 of them, all the rest, 97 out of the 100, underestimate their capabilities and use so little of their true or hidden potential. Now, indeed, they use just about 1%, 100th of 1% of their true or hidden potential. And sometimes, to be safe, I just ramp it up to 3%, just to make people comfortable. And in an extreme case, 10% to flatter people. But the situation is that serious. Okay. Now, one of the manifestations of this situation is the fact that the average person is afraid to speak in public. And indeed, it is known that public speaking is one of the greatest fears in adults, and it's ranked above the fear of death. So more people are afraid to speak in public than they are afraid to die. More people are afraid to speak in public than they are afraid to die. And when I say speak in public, it could be even in a simple meeting like this interaction we are having. If we open up the platform that people should make contribution or ask questions, that fear of speaking will be there, and it's normal. It's a problem. It's one of the fears, or the number one fear among adults. Children usually don't have that problem. By the time they grow up, would have crept them into line to be like us. Sorry about that, but that's how we were fearless. We could speak our mind freely when we were very young. But society, parents, teachers, ministers, they whip us, they tame us, they clip our wings and build us to be very reluctant at speaking. Now, this happens even in corporate circles, to the extent that the research that was done some time ago, it is established that most executives have issues or concerns they wish they could raise for discussion with their people at the workplace, but are afraid to do so because of the emotions such issues may arouse. So they are afraid to raise issues for discussion just because of the implications or the ramifications. So this problem is a very serious one, all because of the issues I've previously raised. Now, why do all these things happen? And most importantly, what can we do about them. And I'll say that nobody can do anything about it except you yourself. So it's an individual responsibility to do something about all these problems in our individual life and then in the life of our people. Now, when I say our people or when I say your people, it could be your family members, it could be your children, it could be your staff members if you are in a work environment, it could be your countrymen, and so on and so forth. So I'll be using that expression of your people. And if I say your people, you can extrapolate it to which of these is applicable to you. So it's your responsibility to do something about all these things. And these are just examples. There are several of them. These are just a few examples. There are several of them. So I often say that these are just a tip of the iceberg. But there are several of the issues we'll be talking about as time goes on. And the emphasis here is that you owe it to yourself and to your people to do something about it. Why is that so? And I want to place that in the context of our socialization. Ordinarily, you did not decide to come into this world. Ordinarily, that's a caveat. None of us ordinarily decided that we wanted to come into this world. You woke up one day to realize that you were in this world and living among people. And the first set of people you met was your family. So before you one day came to self-consciousness and you find yourself among people called your family. Okay, and family could be blood related or by circumstances. So family is your immediate circle of close associates you live with. Okay, and then chances are that they will take you to one religious organization or the other at a very early age. You begin to learn things from there. So the family will be teaching you things. The religious organization will be teaching you things. And then along the line, you are taken to school. School will be teaching you things. And then you get exposed to arts and entertainment, probably through the media or live sessions. You'll be learning things from there. You get exposed to the news. The business environment also have influence on you, and government also have influence on you. So for instance, in Ghana, wearing of mask is mandatory when you are in public. These were instituted by the government upon the advice of healthcare professionals. But it's the government that is forcing it on, or it's the government that is enforcing it. So whether we like it or not, the government is compelling us to do things in a particular way. And if we don't, the government has the power to punish us. Now, all these 7 are referred to as the 7 pillars of culture, in the sense that what you have become in life as of now is as a result of the influence of all these over the period. So some are gradual, some others are drastic, but the sum total of your character, the sum total of your mannerisms, the sum total of your attitude, or let me put it this way, your attitude, your character, your aspirations, your fears, your desires, and everything there is about you have been the result of all these woven together in a very complex way over the period. So they are called the 7 pillars of culture. Now, what is sad is that in spite of their best intentions, the family loves you when they are directing you, they are doing so out of care, out of love. When you go to church, when you go to the mosque, when you go to wherever, whatever religious organization you find yourself in, what the leaders teach you, what they tell you, the things you are made to do, they do it out of care, out of love, out of concern, out of sincerity most of the time. A few of them are not sincere, but let's say that most of them are sincere. And so when you go to school, your teachers are teaching you things. They do it out of sincerity, wanting to help you, even though they may not do it in the best of ways. But all these people generally are doing it out of concern, out of care, out of love for you. In spite of all these, the eventual outcome is a very poor one. In other words, family, religion, school, arts and entertainment, news, business, government, they all do a rather poor job. And that is why we end up with all the difficulties we end up with. And I've already enumerated some of them. So that means that you cannot continue to depend on them solely to come out of the mess, quote and unquote. Okay. As Albert Einstein said, the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So these 7 pillars of culture, until they come to the realization of the problems they are generating, which we hardly talk about, like I've already said, so we are not conscious of the problems we are creating. For a long time, they'll continue to do the things the same way. And that means you are the only person who can help yourself really and help your people out of it. So that is it. And I want to highlight why this is so, to help place this thing, this to hammer the point well enough. So I'll talk about school, because for most of us, to be able to succeed in life, we tend to default to the school. In other words, a lot of us go to school because we want to do well in life. And as we hear often, when we are growing up, we are advised to go to school, study hard, and become somebody. In other words, find a good job, well-paying job with good benefits, and so on. And the second pillar we defer to is our religion. Okay. Before the rest of them. Okay, so let's talk about school. Now, in spite of the amount we spend acquiring education from school up to the university level, from up to even professorship, it is known over the years that only 10% of the time and resources that is spent in school is spent on that which contributes to 85% of the person's true effectiveness and greatness in life. Now, let me put it this way. And this is based on a research that was done by Harvard University. Harvard conducted a survey, and the outcome showed that to succeed in life, there are 2 broad domains: the aptitude and then the attitude. Aptitude, that's the knowledge and skill you acquire, and then attitude, how you look at things and how you respond to things and situations. To simplify these 2 domains. Now, they established that aptitude contributes just about 15% to our success in life, whereas attitude contributes about 85%. And they found out that school spends 10% of the time and resources on attitude, developing people's attitude properly. They spend 90% of the time and resources developing the aptitude, giving you head knowledge, that which will contribute just about 15% of your true success in life. Okay. So that is a situation that pertains with the educational system. And this finding has been corroborated by research done under the auspices of the Carnegie Institute for the Advancement of Teaching and other schools or other research institutions. So it's been corroborated by several other researches that have been done independently by other people. So someone like Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad Poor Dad fame says that school teaches you more and more about less and less. School teaches you more and more about less and less. And let me explain that a little more. School teaches you more and more about less and less. So let's say that you want to be a psychologist. So we recommend that you go to the university, and one of the courses or the main course you may have to read is psychology. So you do psychology as first degree. Now in first degree, you'll be taught the broad subject of psychology. So you'll be taught bits and pieces about almost everything psychology is about. But you don't major in any sphere of psychology per se. So you are a general practitioner when it comes to psychology when you do the first degree. After a first degree, you may want to improve or advance in your career in psychology and decide that you want to go into child psychology. So you go and do a master's in child psychology. So you realize that instead of the broad scope of psychology, you are now taking out just child psychology, which is a small scope within the broader scope. And you are learning more details about that. So you are learning more about less. So you do child psychology at second degree. After that, you may want to further your career by doing a PhD. So this time, within child psychology, you may now take, say, psychology of children with autism. So within child psychology, you are narrowing down further to look at autism, so autistic children, and learn more about the psychology of autistic children. So you are learning more and more about less and less. So when you acquire degrees, it does not necessarily make you knowledgeable in the real sense of life. You are just knowledgeable in a very small area. Okay, so school is not meeting up to the hype. And that is why you can't rely on school alone. So in essence, what we learn from the formal school system helps us or is able to harness just about 22% of our effectiveness and greatness in life. The remaining 78% is not found in the classroom and can be found only in informal environments like seminars, like what we are discussing. And indeed, we'll be focusing more on what the 78% that we don't get from the classroom happen to be, and then delve into that. Now, the idea is to speak for 45 minutes and then allow time for questions. And I think I am about done with that 45 minutes. So I'll be pausing and then I'll take questions. But I've been talking about the school system. So one Professor Willmata had said that education and schooling are not the same thing. What goes on inside the schools are not always education. And the result may well be to reduce productive capacity rather than to increase it. So what Professor Willmata, the first Black to win Nobel laureate, Nobel Prize in a field other than peace, what he said was that oftentimes what we get from school is no education at all. And that by getting what you get from school, chances are that you'll be ineffective at the end of the day. And that is what is happening. So school is good, but it's not enough. And we need to be aware so that we can pay closer attention to some of the things they are going to be sharing. Because like as I've already said, we're focusing on the 78%. The things, the principles, the strategies, the principles, the strategies, and so on. That will help us to harness the 78% of our true or hidden potential that the mainstream educational system ordinarily is not able to harness. Of course, some schools are beginning to realize this, and they are now partnering with organizations like CS Foundation and other organizations to be able to complement their efforts with some of these. So education and schooling are not the same thing. What goes on inside the schools are not always education, and the result may well be to reduce productive capacity rather than to increase it. And one Daniel Boston, he says that the great obstacle to progress is not ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. The great obstacle to progress is not ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. In other words, thinking that you know much just because you have experience or you have certificates or you have titles, and not paying attention to complementary knowledge like what we are sharing may be the one that will be harming you, and not just because you are ignorant. Now, it's unfair to call this here because you are here, because you know the benefits of having complementary knowledge like we are sharing. But what about those who saw the publication? What about those who saw our advertisement but did not bother because they think they know? That is where the problem is. So it will take us to be engaging them to draw their attention to some of these things so that they can also begin to want to find help for themselves. Because a lot of people are in the mode we call unconscious incompetence. They don't know what they don't know. So they despise such programs because they don't know what they are missing. So that's what Daniel Boston is talking about. Now, Einstein says that wisdom is not a product of schooling, but of the lifelong attempt to acquire it. And so I will pause here, but with a little quiz, which is in the diagram, how many squares are there? In other words, how many squares can you make out in total? So we are zooming into questions time, Q&A. So you can unmute your mic when you want to speak, and then you can go ahead and ask your questions and make your contribution.